Week 8 of the fantasy football season. His quarterback starts hits every matchup. Thursday night, Minnesota Vikings at the Los Angeles Rams. Sam Darnold, he's been a solid quarterback all season long. And when you got a wide receiver, obviously, like Justin Jefferson, one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in the league, he's going to make things easier. Sam Darnold's got a big arm. He's comfortable in this offense. And also Aaron Jones has been a big factor in the running game, opening up the passing game as well, where teams have to respect the run and load the box at times. So he's a start versus the middle of the pack to a poor defense at the Rams. Matthew Stafford is it. I know Cooper Kupp most likely returning in this game, but he's not going to be 100% is Cooper Kupp. He might be on a snap count, but anytime you get Cooper Kupp back in the lineup, it's definitely a plus. But this is a great defense of the Minnesota Vikings. They create turnovers, they get to the quarterback, and those are things Stafford has done throughout his career. Frequently, Green Bay Packers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jordan Love, he's locked in weekly as a start. The only thing with Love, the interceptions have been a problem for him this season, but when he's putting up 3-4 touchdowns per game like he has over the last few weeks, those interceptions aren't as big hits. At Jordan Love, ever since coming off the knee injury, he's come back and he's put up some monster games. And this week versus a weak Jacksonville secondary, I believe Love goes out there, has a big ball game. Trevor Lawrence is it. Lawrence, we've seen some flashes from him this season. Jaguars actually have won 2 out of 3 games now, is this Jacksonville Jaguar team. But Trevor Lawrence, it's been a struggle for the most part. And the only bright side pretty much is Brian Thomas Jr., Evan Ingram on this offense. Lawrence's numbers have definitely gone up, I would say, the last 2 weeks since Ingram's been back in the lineup, but still not enough in a tough matchup versus a defense that gets to the quarterback as well and creates turnovers. He's a sit. Arizona Cardinals at the Miami Dolphins. Kyler Murray, he's a start in this ball game. Murray last week, a big 44-yard run in the fourth quarter, finally in the end zone. And with his running ability, and at times he could throw the football great from the pocket, he's tough to sit most weeks as Kyler Murray. And this week in a great matchup at the Dolphins, where their defense hasn't been all that great this season, he's a start, even though I think they might be rejuvenated if Tua returns. And now to Tua, he's a borderline option. We have to see how Tua reacts in the pocket after sitting out the last 6 weeks. Might be rusty. You don't want to take that big hit at Tua, and we'll see on a sack or two how he reacts. So right now we take a wait-and-see approach, even though I did mention to hit Tua off the waiver wire. But like I said, we got to take a wait-and-see approach, and if Tua looks fine and can get that football out and make the big plays like we've seen from him over the last couple seasons, then he's a guy to plug back in the lineup. But this week, even in a good matchup versus Arizona, he's a borderline option. Tyler Huntley, Tim Boyle, this sits for me if Tua's out in this game. These quarterbacks can't move the football down the field. And none of the skill players like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane have done nothing with those guys at quarterback. The only one who's benefited, honestly, has been Jonnu Smith, where obviously these quarterbacks throw underneath. The target is the tight end position. New York Jets at the New England Patriots. Amon Rodgers, the picks have definitely been a concern for him this season amongst the league leaders' receptions. But Rodgers has a great matchup this week at the Patriots, a team he took care of business a few weeks ago versus them. And now with Devontae Adams added to this team, last week made his debut. 3 catches, 30 yards. Garrett Wilson, a solid wide receiver. And Breece Hall, good receiver out of the backfield. This week it's a plus matchup where we just saw the Jaguars torch this New England Patriot defense. So even with the offensive struggles and the turnovers, I like Rodgers this week. Drake May a start. Drake May, 2 games in his NFL career, over 20 fantasy points in both those ball games for Drake May. So he's got a big arm. This team, they're most likely going to be trailing and playing garbage time, where Drake May's going to get some points. And at least him and Hunter Henry are hooking up on big plays. And JaMychal Hasty out of the backfield has been pretty decent receiving the football. So we targets over there when Demario Douglas, he had 1 good game and 1 bad game since Mason at quarterback. But like I said, with garbage time and the Jet defense, they've been giving up a lot of yards in the air the last few weeks. We just saw Russell Wilson go out there and throw for a big game. I have confidence as May as a starter. Baltimore Ravens at the Browns. Lamar Jackson, he's locked in as the number 1 quarterback this season. Last ball game, went out there, put on a clinic, 5 touchdowns on Monday night at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this week at division rival, going to the dog pound at the Cleveland Browns. I think Lamar goes out there once again and puts up a big game. Jameis Winston, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, whoever's going to start, I'm not starting them in this game. I know this Raven defense hasn't been all that great this season, but this Brown offense, one of the worst, if not the worst in the league. We know Deshaun Watson out for the season, torn Achilles, but with every team playing, and these 2 quarterbacks pretty much haven't done much, especially Jameis Winston the last few seasons. They're both sits. Philadelphia Eagles at the Bengals. Jaylen Herz, he hasn't put up elite numbers, but still a top 7, top 8 quarterback this season in fantasy points. And to get A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith back over the last few weeks, it's been a big help for this Eagle team and for Jaylen Herz. And also with Saquon Barkley in the backfield, obviously he's been taking fantasy points away from Jaylen Herz, and rightfully so. Saquon's been a top 5 back all season long, but this week in a potential shootout and a Cincinnati Bengal defense that just isn't that good, I think Jaylen Herz once again goes out there and puts in a good game. Joe Burrow will start each and every week. When you got two wideouts like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Chase Brown, a decent receiver out of the backfield, you're going to put up fantasy points, and that's been the case with Joe Burrow this season. He's been a top 5 quarterback all season long, and I know this Eagle defense, they're getting a little bit better over the last couple weeks, but Burrow's been matchup proof, and he's a start. Indianapolis Colts at the Houston Texans. Anthony Richardson, he's unstartable. And 2 games out of the 5 he started double-digit fantasy points this season. And one of them, yes, was a 30-point fantasy day versus the Texans in Week 1, but that was a home game. And Anthony Richardson, he's just not a player that's throwing the football and driving it down the field. So if he don't get elite yards on the ground to find the end zone as Richardson, he's pretty much not doing anything for fantasy owners. He's a sit. CJ Stroud a start. I know last week it was a bad ball game, under 100 yards passing, but Stroud, he never has 2 bad games in a row, and this week he's going to make adjustments, and he had a good ball game Week 1 versus Indianapolis Colts defense. I think back home after 2 road games, Stroud bounces back and has a nice performance. Tennessee Titans at the Lions. Will Levis, Mason Rudolph. It doesn't matter who's starting quarterback. Both these guys are not going to get the job done. They're not putting up fantasy numbers, and no teams on bye this week as well. And I know this Lion defense hasn't been all that great this season, but you can't trust Levis or Rudolph. Jared Goff a start. One of the better quarterbacks over the last 3 weeks is Jared Goff. And when you got guys like Amon Rodgers, St. Brown, Sam Laporta, even though his numbers have dropped off this season, even though Jameson Williams is a big loss, suspended 2 games for PEDs, I still think Jared Goff, especially at home, he's been a great quarterback, one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the league. And with St. Brown, Laporta, and Gibbs out of the backfield, and even Tim Patrick's been a decent number 3 receiver, stepping in to that number 2 spot. I think Goff will be fine in this game. He's a start. Falcons at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Kirk Cousins, last couple games, he's definitely struggled, but coming back to that Week 5 game, he threw for a monster game, 504 and 4 touchdowns versus same Tampa Bay defense. So Kirk Cousins, I got to put him in the lineup. He had great success in that game. All his weapons are still available. Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts. So this week at Tampa Bay, where they give up tons of points and tons of yards, we saw with Lamar and the Ravens last week. He went for 5 touchdowns in that one. Kirk Cousins, once again, is a start in this matchup. Baker Mayfield the start. I know he's without Mike Evans most likely. We know Godwin out for the season with the dislocated ankle, but Baker Mayfield's a gunslinger, and he finds ways to get guys open. I think he's a product of the system. Even though those are great, talented wide receivers, he's going to miss in Evans and obviously Chris Godwin. But this is a decent matchup, and the only thing, Baker's definitely going to drop down in the rankings this week, but still a starting quarterback to me. New Orleans Saints at the Chargers. Spencer Rattler, it looks like he's going to start once again in this one. Derek Carr banged up with the rib and the oblique injury. And this same team started off 2-0 on the season now, 2-5 on the season, where it looks like it's another lost year for New Orleans. So Rattler, we know he's got some running ability, but the arm isn't that great. And even if Chris Olave plays behind him, it's very thin in the passing game. He's a sit. Justin Herbert is sit. The yards were there last week at the Arizona Cardinals, but lost on a field goal 17-15. So he had 300 yards, no doubt about it, was Justin Herbert, but he's not finding the end zone this season. He's not reaching more than 15 fantasy points has been his ceiling. And this Saint defense, for the most part, has been a solid unit this year. I know last week the Broncos came in and destroyed him, putting up over 30 points in that game. But Justin Herbert, I just don't see him having a good performance. Buffalo Bills at the Seattle Seahawks. Josh Allen, he's a start each and every week. Josh Allen, cannon arm, could run the football, number 1 quarterback off the board. And now with Amari Cooper in the lineup, that's another good weapon in the offense. And Cooper found the end zone in his debut last week with this Bill team. And we know this Seahawks secondary isn't any good, so Josh Allen a must start. Geno Smith is it. I know this week it's not a great matchup for Geno Smith. I know they're going back home. Is Seattle. And Geno Smith, he's amongst the league leaders in passing yards, dropbacks, and all that. But now with DK Metcalf, even if he plays not 100%, this Bill defense the last couple weeks is starting to buckle down, make plays, get to the quarterback. And now, like I said, if they're down early and often, Seattle, which we've seen the last 3 out of 4 weeks, they've had trouble moving the football and putting points on the board. So I think Geno Smith, whatever team playing, is a sit. The Bears at the Commanders, Caleb Williams a borderline option. I know the last 2 games he's played, he's definitely picked up the pace, and now coming off a bye week, we know rookies get into the playbook a little bit more, and coaching staff has more trust in the rookies. So this offense, a dynamic offense, obviously. DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, he's been great this season. DeAndre Swift out of the backfield. Keenan Allen last game found the end zone twice. Rome Odunze, even though we haven't seen much out of him. But Caleb Williams, this is still a tougher matchup, and I still don't 100% trust Williams. There's a week in and week out start, so this week he's a borderline option. Jaden Daniels banged up with the rib, but he returned to the sidelines in the second half of that game versus the Panthers, and he was waving to the fans and had a big smile on his face. So I expect Jaden Daniels is going to play, and he's been a top 2, top 3 quarterback all season long. Season start this week, Kansas City Chiefs at the Raiders, Patrick Mahomes. It's definitely been a tough season for him in terms of fantasy football, and obviously tons of injuries. Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster now, Isaiah Pacheco. But this week, a slam dunk matchup at the Las Vegas Raiders. They can't stop anyone. Quarterbacks have gone out there and put on big performances, and this week Patrick Mahomes is a start for me, even though he's going to be down in the rankings as well. Gardner Minshew was sit. Now he's the starting quarterback once again. Aiden O'Connell, broken thumb, out 4 to 6 weeks. Tough matchup versus the Chiefs. And you're not going to start Gardner Minshew even if there was tons of injuries or even if he had a good matchup. He's just not getting the job done. And obviously with Adams traded away a few weeks ago to the Jets, they don't have a true number 1 at the receiver position. Carolina Panthers at the Denver Broncos, Andy Dalton is sit. Dalton had a few good games early in the season when he came in for Bryce Young at the starting quarterback position. But this week, tough matchup. Broncos, one of the best defenses in the league, and we saw them pick apart last week the offense of the New Orleans Saints. So this week, Andy Dalton, an easy sit. Bo Nix, borderline option. He's a quarterback that runs the football a whole lot. Last week, we saw 75 yards on the ground from Bo Nix. I know the receiving core isn't great. Courtland Sutton, Troy Franklin, Josh Reynolds when healthy, Devon Valet. So Knicks and this team, it's built on running the football and playing good defense. But like I said, with his running ability, and if he could just get at least 150, 200 yards in the air with a touchdown, and let's say 6 or 7 points on the ground, I think Bo Nix could be a borderline option versus a weak defense. Dallas Cowboys at the 49ers. Dak Prescott's a sit. He's after Dak Prescott the last few weeks to put up fantasy points. I know they're coming off a bye. I know they're going to want to get off to a good start, get some players back in the lineup as well. But Dak Prescott's not really a quarterback this season, I trust. And like I said, a bad track record versus 49er team. And this Niner team knows they got to rely on their defense more now with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk out. So Dak Prescott, I don't see him doing much in this ball game. He's a sit. Brock Purdy a start. Like I mentioned, Deebo out. Brandon Ayuk out for the season. George Kittle banged up. We don't know if he's going to play in this ball game. But Purdy's a smart quarterback. I think he's going to adjust. They got Juwan Jennings, who him and Purdy have a great rapport. We saw Jennings go for 11 for 175 and 3 touchdowns early in the season. And also, you got Ricky Pearsall, who I think is going to want to prove things and get things going. So I think in a matchup with a banged-up Cowboy secondary and defense overall, I think Purdy could go out there and be a serviceable option. Final game of the week, Giants at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Daniel Jones, Drew Lock. In a week with every team playing, you're not going to trust these guys. They can't get the job done. This is a tough matchup with one of the best defenses in the league. They're easy sits. And Russell Wilson last week, he definitely surprised going out there and putting up over 25 fantasy points as Russell Wilson versus a good New York Jet defense. So this week with a good matchup versus New York Giants, where their secondaries had problems all season long, even though they do get to the quarterback and lead the league in sacks. Russell Wilson, I would have confidence as him as a back-end starting option. That quarterback starts sits every matchup for Week 8 of the fantasy football season.